guys, sorry about missing a few days of recording. Phoenix was in the room with me and I were at a con together. What are you doing today?
I am sketching one of my favorite shows that I grew up with, and it's Rurouni Kenshin.
She's gonna be sketching today while I'm doing my recording. We were attempting to do kind of a picture-in-picture where I kind of do like a screen capture of her as she's drawing, but it was going to be kind of a pain in the butt to do that this late at night, so we decided that while I'm doing my video, I will show you little images of her progress. And the reason I am going to have not only that, but also the discussion of today's video be more art-centric is because I want you guys to be able to learn more about our creative process when it comes to creating graphic novels, since that's kind of what we're starting to do for a living. And I want to help anybody who's kind of new to it by showing them the ropes. And today's discussion is something that a lot of people tend to forget about when they're talking about getting into art, and that is accountability. Accountability is very important when it comes to anything artistic, whether you're recording videos for a living or singing or painting, anything. Accountability is very important. And the reason I thought about this today is because there is a YouTuber called Petty Page. She's out of the UK, and what she usually does is just kind of YouTuber drama type videos, but she's trying to get into more just internet news in general lately. And this morning her video was about a girl, well, young lady, she's like 25, from China. I believe she's called Ms. Yeah, and she does those like really weird kind of goofy life hack type videos, and they all deal with food. And despite what some people may say, I consider making YouTube videos a form of art. You're doing something creative, and for the most part you're getting paid for it or hoping to get paid for it. And what happened was, this young lady, she never claimed that her videos were for children. She never claimed they were not for children. Still though, because they're kind of ridiculous in nature, things like making a barbecue out of a lamp and stuff, young people were attracted to her videos. And what happened was, she had a video where she was using a Pepsi can and a candle, like a full stick candle with alcohol, I believe, to make popcorn as a weird hack thing. And what happened was, a couple 14-year-olds found this video, and thinking it looked like fun because of, again, how ridiculous it is, they tried to mimic what they saw. Unfortunately, at 14 years old, you don't really know that much about science. You know the basics, things like what different clouds are called and what photosynthesis is, and that's about as far as your knowledge extends on the matter. So they didn't realize that by adding extra alcohol, they would basically make a bomb, which is pretty much what happened. Unfortunately, they both got severely burned to the point where I believe one girl has 96% of her body just charred now, and the other one actually died. And the parents of the girl who died, as well as a lot of the internet, is saying, well, your art form caused the death of a child, you need to compensate us. And this is something that happens with people who are artistic a lot. Not luckily to this extent. This is an extreme case. It generally isn't this out of control and this bad in most cases, but it did bring to light the issue of, if a young person or someone who is not as well versed in whatever it is you do catches wind of what you create and has something happen as a result that the parents find to be a negative thing, how at fault are you for what happened? Our more home version of this has been, in the past, we don't want to put an exact rating on our books. We don't want to feel like we're telling anyone you can't read this. However, if you approach me, I've done this, you know, in real life. If you approach me and look at the cover of the book and you've got a fleet of children behind you, I tend to say, before you open that book, I recommend it's for age 16 plus. But you know your kid better than I do. And if they ask, well, why is it 16 plus? I usually just say like LVN, and that's it, because the kid doesn't know what that means, but the parent does. And even after saying that, I have had some of them open the book anyway and then look at me like I'm crazy and get angry because their kid opened it to the wrong page and saw something they shouldn't have seen. So now this is where I want you over there to enter the conversation. How at fault do you think an artist is if they create something and something negative happens? If a child who's like 14 years old, like these girls were, bought Fire Sphere and they learned a bunch of nasty language and they decided to start like hurling stuff at each other because this is what it looks like the characters are doing, and one of them got badly hurt, do you think we should have to apologize for that child's injury and compensate the parents for it?
Honestly, if you put warnings and all that stuff, the person has been warned, so it's freedom of whatever we do. You can draw whatever you want. You cannot do what you can produce whatever you want. It's really up to the readers, like what they want to perceive from it, and we don't have control over what other people do.
Now that's actually an interesting point you brought up, because the internet's obviously very divided on what happened to this young girl versus the girl who made the original video. And that is something people brought up. Well, she's accountable because apparently on her blog that she has, she says like, don't replicate this or try it at home. But on YouTube, she doesn't have any warnings because she wasn't, in her eyes, making them for children. She was making them for adults. And the parents and the people who are siding with the parents are saying, well, you never said this video isn't for kids, so it's still your fault, even though she said she wasn't making it for them. So that's kind of the sticky aspect of what's happening that's getting everybody fighting right now. What do you think of stuff like that? If someone was like, well, because you don't have 16 or 18 plus or whatever right on the cover of your book, then it's your fault my kid picked this up at a comic book shop and read this. Or do you think, no, the parent should be with the kids looking through the book first and be like, you're not reading this?
Honestly, that's one of those like hard things. Like, I'm not censoring the story just to like be able to sell it to kids.
And that's kind of how this girl feels. She did release recently, like last month, an official apology video, but in it she basically said this channel wasn't made for kids. This isn't part of, you know, little kid YouTube. I made it for adults. I am an adult. I'm really sorry this happened to your kid and stuff, but I don't think I should be held accountable, because how am I to know that a 14-year-old is going to go and accidentally build a bomb off of what I'm creating? Like, it's obviously fake. It's obviously supposed to be like silly comedy. And people were kind of angry. They were like, that's not even a real apology. You're not taking any accountability and you're like not admitting any fault. And that's where that whole argument of like, well, does she have to admit fault comes from, which happens a lot with us. I mean, I see it happen with like graphic novels and stuff all the time in Amazon reviews, that if it doesn't say right on the front that it's 18 plus, no one sits there and reads the description. They just get it for their kid anyway, and then you see all these pissed off mothers in the comments and the reviews on Amazon saying, my kid saw boobs and stuff, and freaking out over it. And it's like, well, I'm sorry, but you can't see something that appears to be like animated or cartoony or something and just decide that makes it for kids. Like, do you let your little kid watch South Park? Hopefully not. So why would you let them look at that? Like, pay attention first. But it is something that you're gonna have to be ready for. If you're a very non-confrontational person, unfortunately, in my opinion, I don't know if you agree, if you're gonna start doing art or graphic novels and stuff for a living, you're gonna have to get over that because people are going to make mistakes like that. They're gonna blame you even if you try to warn them that's not for kids. And bad things might happen and they're gonna decide it's your fault because you made the thing. It feels like censorship a bit. It's just like the issue happening on YouTube right now where if you want to be paid for all the hard work you're doing, you have to make everything family friendly. And it's like, well, true crime YouTubers can't be family friendly. Who's gonna sit there and let their like 9-year-old watch something about how there was a mass rapist who killed a bunch of kids?
Honestly, it should depend on the genre. Like, what do you... Okay, so... For example, what I'm drawing right now is Kenshin. Kenshin is... Honestly, to me, I watched it when it was on Toonami because they censored it. And they were able to let a lot of things slide because they made it for kids and stuff. But it's not kids. It's like, I grew up with it. And a lot of other shows on Cartoon Network. And it has its moments where, yeah, there's like people getting like chopped up and like fighting with swords and stuff. And like my mom just understood that it was like I was old enough to like be okay watching it. It's like if they see that stuff when you're little, like younger or something, then my mom would be like, no, you're not watching that. Like she would do that with a lot of like crude shows like Ren and Stimpy. I'm glad because Ren and Stimpy was pretty crazy.
It's bad.
And I'm glad I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I was allowed to watch Rocco, which is any better, but yeah. I mean, I grew up, like, it became this thing, like, a lot of my friends watched Toonami, and I watched Toonami because of, like, the new thing to watch instead of, like, Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon was, like, more kids stuff, like, almost younger kids stuff, but then, like, Cartoon Network was like, oh, yay, now we're, like, older, we can start watching, like, these shows and stuff like DBZ and Tenchi and Kenshin and stuff, and it was like the cool thing to watch at the time. That show has had its moments.
Like with this specific girl who had this unfortunate incident happen, and just in general with other artists, if someone has not labeled whatever their art is as, you know, like 14 plus, M plus, stuff like that, with an explanation of why, do you think they are at fault if something happens to a child? Do you think they're partially at fault, or do you think they're not at fault at all and that people should be watching their own children?
I think after a certain point, I honestly don't know.
It's a hard one. That's why I understand why people are upset, and like, I think it's horrible that happened to that little girl, and I think it's horrible when anything like this happens, that like a poor kid, you know, turns on a horror movie and is traumatized or something. Like, I think that's all awful, and I wish it didn't have to happen to children where something upsetting or dangerous happens to them. But I also think that in this case at least, people are way too quick to say she needs to just compensate everyone with her own money and apologize and like everything's all her fault and she has to fix it all, because nobody can seem to come to an agreement. Like, even you right now can't decide if she's at fault or not. And everyone's just diving down this girl's throat, and that's what happens with all art, where it's like, oh, my kid learned something bad from you, so now you have to do this, that, and the other to fix it. And it's like, but slow down. Do you agree? It's pretty much 100% going to happen at some point when you're selling your art or your graphic novel or whatever. Someone is gonna do something dumb and decide it's your fault.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. And you've got to be ready for it, and you can't be mousy and just give them what they want every time. If you think you were legitimately at fault, then go ahead and apologize by all means and fix it however you can. But if you think that that person didn't listen to you, like the lady who just opened it anyway in front of her kids and then got mad at me, stand up for yourself. Don't be afraid to be like, no, it's not my problem that you showed that to your kid after I said something.
Like I said, for my story, I'm not censor anything because that was what kind of destroyed a lot of shows on Toonami. Like, whenever you don't... Toonami was the only way that we could watch, that I could watch any type of anime shows. Because they didn't have a lot of anime stuff here yet. And the only other place that you can get is like at Suncoast whenever it was in business and that kind of stuff. And we didn't have a lot of money, so we watched a lot on TV. And whenever we did have the money, I would go out and buy some, and then it was like completely different experience of watching it on a DVD versus what was on TV because they cut so much stuff out of it. I don't want to be...
For kids?
Yes.
Where it's like a 10-minute episode now.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to... Like, I understand why they did it. They wanted more exposure to, like, the new in thing to watch and all that stuff. But at the time, if I was a creator or something of it, I wouldn't like that. Because it was just like you just censored a bunch of stuff that actually kind of means a lot to the show. And, well, with Kenshin, it wasn't... Tenchi was a big one with the censor.
I think that's why, like, when I finally got exposed to anime in, like, 7th grade, I couldn't tell what the hell any of the storylines were meant to be because things were so heavily censored that the story was just lost.
And Kenshin was more violent. So they had, what they did with the censoring in that was cover up the blood with black, so it looked like whenever someone bled, black stuff came out of them. And... And they didn't have, like, some, like, a lot of times they would have, like, lollipops in their mouth instead of the cigarettes. Because they don't want people seeing someone smoke and wanting to smoke after it. Because, like, their favorite character or something, like, smoked. And, that I can understand why they did it, because that wasn't kind of good. But it was just funny, like, seeing, like, the different things that TV did versus the DVDs and stuff.
It sounds like you and I are kind of on the same page as far as, like, censorship to a certain degree is okay, but that you also have to keep in mind not everything is family friendly and not everything has to be family friendly. There should be platforms that still exist that allow artistic people to express their art in whatever way they choose and not have to worry about, oh, is it like advertiser friendly? Because someone is going to want to pick you up no matter what. I mean, look at some of the shows that are on Adult Swim. They are literally advertised by AdamandEve.com. So obviously there's an advertiser for everyone.
Yeah, okay, so Tenchi was one where obviously, like, you didn't notice until you got the DVDs that they painted bathing suits on them, on the characters, because there was a lot of stuff taken out of Tenchi. I always wondered why it was only, like, 20 minutes versus a half hour, because they took so much out because of the language and the censoring and stuff, and a lot of it was because there was some pretty suggestive stuff in it. And some of it was they painted bathing suits on them so they wouldn't, like, be naked and stuff. And it was just kind of funny.
That kind of falls into what I was just talking about, how not everything is made for families and kids and not everything should be, because I can only imagine, like, back then, your kid is watching this show that they love and you're watching the censored version with them and you think, oh, this is harmless enough, and buy them the DVD, and then what happens?
That's what I did.
Because how is the parent supposed to know if it was harmless on TV? They're like, oh, that's what this show is. And then they get it because it shouldn't have been censored in the first place. It was for adults.
Okay, so I'm going to tell everybody this story. This is showing my age. So Suncoast was still around, and there was a Tenchi movie, and it was 16 and up. And I was definitely not 16 yet. And I was still in, I think I was 5th or 6th grade. I think it was 6th grade. Yeah, 6th grade. 10 or 11. And Mari, like my friend Mari, I was like, hey, my dad got me this moment of buy it for me because she knew it was 16 up and Dad bought it for me. And it was 16 and up. And we watched it and it was like, oh, the only reason why it was 16 because there was like nudity and there was like a not sex scene, but not sexy. It was like, and that was the reason why. And everything was wrong. Mom never even knew. I hid it so well in my closet. And then the one day, I was telling Mari about it on the phone, and Mom was eavesdropping. And that's how she found out that I had it. And she was so pissed.
The thing is, though, like, you, though, even though you weren't supposed to have it, you were, as far as maturity goes, able to handle that movie, whereas another kid your age probably couldn't have. That's how my sister and I always were. The stuff I could handle, she definitely could not handle, so I was allowed to watch certain things she wasn't. And that's another thing that kind of goes into the should stuff be censored, because that's why when people ask us, is your book series safe for kids? We tell them the recommended age, but we say, we don't know your kid though. You're welcome to page through it a little bit and see what you think. Because we had, how old was that little girl at Steel City? She was like 12, and her mom says perfectly fine for her, even though it's full of sex and violence and language. So, I mean, and she was like, no, she'll be okay. But another 12-year-old's like, hell no, that kid can't read that. It depends on the innocence of your kid. It depends on how sensitive they are. And in the case of that poor YouTuber, like, I don't know, I kind of feel sorry for her. I'm sorry if that's a unpopular opinion. I'm sorry if it makes people angry, but I feel sorry for her just like I feel sorry for the kid, because I feel like because something tragic happened, people need someone to blame, because they need to direct that pain someplace because a child passed away. I think, yes, maybe it would have been a good idea for her to say in the description of her video that it was something dangerous and that it was a fake stunt, and don't actually try to do this because it won't work. You will create a grenade. But at the same time, her neglecting to say something was fake when she thought her audience knew that, I don't think makes her solely responsible for the death of a child. And likewise, when it comes to artists and Artist Alley at Comic-Cons, if you're not looking at your kid and they start looking through someone's R18 book, you can't expect us to know your kid's age. I've been approached by 15-year-olds I thought were 18 looking at them. You can't expect us to just magically know the age or maturity of your kid, and you need to be keeping an eye on them and talking to them and helping them understand that everyone is welcome in these spaces, artistic spaces, and that we can't be held solely accountable for something going wrong.
My final thought is that I'm sorry that happened, that it's really horrible that happened. I don't want to sound like I didn't care the whole time that this was going on. Like, I care. Like, it's really horribly sad that happened to that little girl. And, it is, like, I just wish that stuff like that didn't have to happen.
Before I close the video, a little personal experience which might help you understand why I'm kind of siding with the middle ground on this instead of just with the parents of the child who died or just with the poor YouTuber involved too. My uncles, when they were I think 8 and 11, back in the 70s, had actually it was in the 60s, they had a chemistry set. And in the 60s, it wasn't one of these things where you just had, you know, your vinegar and your baking soda. Like, you had real life chemicals, because the older one, who was, you know, my Uncle Chuck, he was kind of genius level, academically speaking, and so he could handle that stuff. At one point, they had both gone in to, you know, get a glass of lemonade or something, and the neighbor boy, who was like 4, came over, saw, ooh, this looks kind of cool, threw a bunch of chemicals into it, and then went home because he heard them coming out and thought he was going to get in trouble. My uncles, who were, again, like, I think 8 and 11 at the most, just continued where they left off, because as children, they did not have the forethought to check whether or not someone had tampered with the set when they went inside the house. And even as an adult, I can admit I probably wouldn't think to do that. Who's gonna think, in the like 2 minutes that I went in to go to the bathroom or get a drink, someone must have messed around with my chemistry set. The second they put their faces in, it exploded. One of my uncles is scarred pretty much the way that Surviving Girl is, like 90% of his body. At no point did my mom's family blame that little boy or his family for the fact that that accident happened. And at no point did anyone blame my uncles for not thinking to check. That was no one's fault. It was a horrible accident that has completely changed their lives forever, and changed my whole family's lives, because we had to see how people react to them on the street. Here's the difference. There's that was a tragic accident. Then I have 2 friends who actually had people dump gas on them and set them ablaze for their own disgusting amusement. Children, 8-year-olds. That, I'd say yes, blame them. Throw their asses in jail. Make them pay. That's their fault. It was not an accident. They did it with malice intent. But what happened to my uncles was an accident, and that's how I see this. It was an accident. That girl never thought kids would accidentally make a bomb, and in her apology, she did try to cover her own ass. Yes, she said, I did not tell them to add extra alcohol. They did it themselves, and everyone got mad at her for it, but that wasn't her fault, and it wasn't the girl's fault either. It was an accident, just like anything else like this that happens with people. And sorry that got grim, but I just think that people need to stop blaming artists for the tragic things that happen, because accidents do just happen sometimes. It's not always somebody's fault. Stop blaming the content for everything. But that's pretty much all we have to say on the matter. I hope you enjoy the cute little sketch that Phoenix has been doing. So this video is a part of the contest series, which means that there's 1 video left to go for the contest, and then you will be subscribing to my YouTube account, and then going to my DMs on Instagram and telling me all 3 keywords. And today's keyword is
Wanderer.
So make sure that you keep these first 2 clues in mind, and as always, do something that makes you happy today, no matter what anyone else thinks about it, and we will see you in the next video.